So I am Master Sergeant Eric Snipes. I am the current program manager for the Multi-Purpose Canine with Marine Forces Special Operations Command. And I was actually a prior dog trainer and handler instructor for the 341st Training Squadron. And I am here to talk about my sobriety and 7 years being sober and the process that it took to get there. To start off with, I have kind of a history of alcoholic issues, my dad, my brother, and then myself, and I really started to become dependent on it after I returned from a deployment in order to sleep. For the first 2 or 3 years it was to sleep, and then after that it was because I really liked the feeling of it. So everything that we do kind of revolves around alcohol. So any kind of get-together that we have, step into gatherings, you know, there's always alcohol involved. So I never saw it as a problem. The time that I started figuring out that it was is when my wife was noticing that I was drinking a lot, and I was sneak drinking. She would never really see me drink, and then all of a sudden I'd be drunk. But I never wanted to change. I didn't care. That's just what I wanted to do. It became pretty apparent that I was dependent on it when I got here to San Antonio, Texas, and I was training dogs, and I couldn't think about not drinking. So during the day, I would be doing my job, and any chance that I had and break that I had, I would think about drinking and how soon I can get home and just have my first drink, and then how fast I can get drunk after that. The problem with me is I can't just have one. It'd be impossible, and if I start, there's no stopping it, and I would just go black out. I started doing things that, as an alcoholic, you have these rules that you don't do, right? Drinking and driving and things of that nature, you just don't do it. And I started breaking some rules, and that's when it started freaking me out a little bit, like this was a problem. But the thought of getting a DUI as a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps, that would have ruined my career, right? So that was absolutely terrifying. And this was near the end. This was probably 2014 time frame. And it started getting really bad at the end when I could actually physically feel my liver. I was having bad dreams. I was having basically hallucinations from the alcohol, because I was drinking nearly a handle a day, probably 2/3 of a handle a day, and then on a weekend I could drink 3 handles easily, no problem. And at the same time, I'm mowing my yard, I'm doing woodwork. I don't know how many times that I was doing woodwork and I'm like, oh my God, I almost just chopped my finger off. So it was starting to become a wake-up call. It was slow going. It took about a year of me doing a lot of dumb stuff and just somehow getting away with it. The hardest thing I think I've ever done in my life, and this is legit, I've deployed, I've been in combat, I've done a lot of things that a lot of people would be, consider to be very difficult. The most difficult thing in my life was to go to my operations chief, Master Sergeant Wildman. I'll remember him for the rest of my life. And tell him that I had a problem, that alcohol was affecting everything that I was doing, and that I needed help, and I didn't know where to go. Even as a staff sergeant at the time in E6 in the Marine Corps, I had an idea of the resources that I had, but without his help guiding me, sending me over there, and counseling me as I'm going through this process, I don't know if I ever would have done it. The next step was actually getting a bed for the inpatient SARC, the Substance Abuse Rehabilitation Center at Point Loma in San Diego. 5 days detox, 35 days another transport down to Point Loma, and 35 days inpatient, where it was some of the hardest treatment that I think I could ever go through, because it was affecting my mind, like why I actually started drinking. What was the root cause of all this? And trying to figure that out. I was not used to having to talk about my feelings. I was not used to having to write down in a diary of what I thought about everyday life. I mean, it was interesting, but it was great because it took me out of that. It took me out of my environment to do a hard reset. I was very resistant for roughly the first week, right? Everybody's in there when we're talking in these groups. And even when I went to Alcoholics Anonymous afterwards, and even the counseling for the 12 months afterwards, very resistant. I didn't want to open up, and I don't know why, but one day it clicked, and that was the one time that I can remember in a long time that I cried, right? That I really identifying that I have a problem, and that if I didn't fix it and seek help and really just open myself up to what others were offering me, I don't know, something clicked during that session. And I just started bawling. I don't think I talked more than 30 seconds, and I just couldn't stop crying. And then after that, it was easy, because something unlocked in my mind and in my person. It was interesting. Being a dog handler, a trainer, I kind of understand a little bit of the principles of conditioning. So once I had it made up in my mind that I was going to stop drinking, that it was going to kill me one day, I started to think back and associate my alcohol use with negative effects, right? So instead of thinking of it as positive, where you see on commercials, the only time that you can have fun was at a party with alcohol or on the beach with alcohol. Everything that you do in your life is the only way it's going to be fun is with alcohol. Was looking back at all the things between the conversations with my wife, the arguments, everything that we were going through, and associating that with negative. And that's what I had to do constantly. The other resource was my command. You know, some people think, a lot of people, I'll even say most military, think that if you have a problem and you admit it to your command, whether it is alcohol abuse or any kind of anger management or anything like that, that you're going to be shunned, you're going to be turned away. Absolutely the exact opposite. I think the strongest thing that you can do as an individual and as a service member is to acknowledge that you have a problem and reach out, because your command, if they're worth anything at all, they're going to do everything in their power to help you out. And so I tell my command when I check in higher up, if they run into Marines that are having issues, or civilians or anything that's within the command are having issues, come to me. I can help them out. I can show them that this isn't the career ender that everybody thinks that it is, and it's the exact opposite. The part of seeking treatment is as much as you want to put into it. If you don't want to do anything about it, then you can ruin yourself. But as long as you put forth some effort, your career will be just fine.